Well,
All right,
since we're connected and I need to have some kind of substance to abuse, let me grab this beer I have in my fridge real quick.
that's a good idea. I'll pull this bong rip.
Yeah, yeah. Make it a binger, please. All right, I'm back.
All right, first let me say nice chair. That looks like
You're a
a.
little choppy.
I said first let me just say nice chair. That looks like a
Oh,
very
thanks, man.
comfortable chair.
Well, if you've got to sit for a really long period of time, if you divide the number of minutes that you spend sitting in the chair by the cost of the chair, it makes it seem a lot less expensive. Plus, it's actually not that expensive to begin with.
Yeah, cost per minute of sitting is a
Yeah.
good. Your chair just keep getting cheaper and
Yeah.
cheaper over time that way. All right, so let me
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
let me take a slightly different approach to this than I normally do. Because of the fact that you've got a bunch of debate experience, that is going to make my normal approach to discourse evaluation a little more challenging.
Okay.
So I'll start with the same question as always, which is, do you have a clear way in which you understand cognitive functions? Like, in other words, you apply a specific understanding of cognitive functions, or do you think yourself somewhere in like the learning about them phase and still not sure, or do you think, or what are your thoughts about?
You're coming in a little bit, like the audio's coming in a little shaky here.
Okay, let me reset my internet and see if that fixes the problem.
Okay.
Give me 2 minutes. All right, can you hear me?
So far, so good.
All right, cool. So can you give me some information about what you already know about cognitive functions and already think about them, and or your level of experience with this model?
Okay. So by this model, you mean just the
The,
8 cognitive functions?
yeah, the union cognitive function idea. What's your relationship with that? There's lots of some people are like socionic, some people are sort of vague, some people are specifically one thing, some people want to say, oh well, I'm different things in different systems. Some people don't know what I'm talking about.
Okay. I've read Carl Jung's Psychological Types probably 10 to 12 years ago. I have some familiarity with socionics. I have my own kind of working definitions of the different cognitive functions that I wouldn't say are in any way um, authoritative or anything, but I have working definitions of the 8 different functions that I use. So,
Okay, and do you have
like if you,
a type right now that you believe yourself to be? Don't tell me what it is.
yeah, so I would say that, well, first of all, based on the test that I took in 2010, I got ENTJ, and that seems reasonable. Um, I'm interested in video typing with somebody it has some expertise in it as sort of a way of looking at the test to see if the test is as valid as it purports to be.
Okay. Can you recall for me a particularly devastating loss in debate or a
Yeah.
particularly satisfying win? Can you tell me about
Okay.
that?
So, yeah, absolutely. I won't say like the most devastating loss, but the most humiliating loss was in the finals of the National Catholic Grand Nationals tournament. This would have been in 2001, sometime in the spring. And our squad, our coach was very anti like college debate, and he was very anti like critiques and political disads and conditional counterplanes and all that stuff. And and what he was really into was having really case specific research. So he wanted us to have, solvency attacks on every single like specific case. Okay. And what we hit was that obviously the team that won the tournament was St. Thomas Academy out of Minnesota. And we didn't have shit on their case at all. And we didn't have any really workable generics that seemed to apply. The case was clearly topical. So basically, in my 1NC, I had to do I literally had to fall on my sword in front of a room full of like 100 people and 5 judges. And I don't remember a lot about what happened other than that we lost 5-0. And there was a girl who was in the audience that walked up to me afterwards. And she said something like, at the beginning of this round, I was laughing at you, but now I respect you and understand how you got here. So that was like definitely, I mean, that was literally probably the only time in my entire debate career since I was a novice that I was completely pants down on the other side's case going negative.
So when you say you got like exposed in some sense up there, did you have to go up there and go like, I don't have any responses to this, or
No. Like I basically stood up and I filled 6.5 minutes with just random teas and some sort of generic disadvantage. I don't really remember the specifics, but what I do remember clearly was at about 6.5 minutes, I literally didn't have shit left in terms of paper in front of me, and I just had to sit down.
So in other words, you read a bunch of stuff, but you didn't generate analytics that were directly responsive to what you actually were hearing.
1N with no prep time, no. I mean, I'm
not criticizing. I'm not criticizing. I'm trying to type you, right? So I'm trying to get a sense of your approach to debate, and now that may be totally misleading what just happened there in terms. And this is what I anticipated happening with you in general. There's no way for me to. It's better to just. And I'm always pretty explicit with the other person, but with you, there's no reason or benefit to gaming your understanding of things because of debate. Because of debate, there's no reason for. It's like we're both very accustomed to using words in all the different ways they get used. So if I'm going to be trying to game you, it's not going to work very well.
Well, don't give me too much credit.
See what I'm saying? See?
Yeah.
The point is, though, that it's like what I'm saying is normally this would mean something like that would suggest a more TE approach over a TI approach would be consistent with ENTJ. But I don't think that's I'm not saying this indicates that. I'm saying that's what it would normally mean. Okay.
Yeah. Hold on. I can rip off this for a little bit. So one thing I didn't tell you was that the case that they ran was the first case that I researched that summer, like the summer between my junior and my senior year of high school. I literally researched the case. It was like the Department of Defense DNA. It was the privacy topic, okay? And we had to research. There were like 4 different categories of privacy. One of them was medical records. One of them was searches and seizures, and I forget what the other 2 were. And the case that they were running was literally the first case that I came up with. And my coach didn't. He and I had a bit of a strained relationship, as I could illustrate with the other story that I have on losses. We weren't running that case, but we somehow or another, I never created a file that would have been the case specific disadvantages or solvencies or solvency turns, whatever. We didn't have any unique cards on the case, and none of the other stuff was going to stick, and I kind of realized that. So I had this just incredible oh shit moment, right? So that's probably the most memorable loss in terms of just getting smacked in the face with being unprepared, which in the finals of like the national tournament was kind of awkward. The only thing I have to say for myself in addition to that is the team that won the NFL Nationals, they actually got a new case sprung on them in the finals, and one of the debaters actually complained about it during CX. It was pretty funny.
One
So
thing I
yeah,
would say
I'm not the only one.
is that moment you're talking about when you realize like you've been out coached. Basically, I think of it more from a coaching perspective now than a debating perspective.
Yeah,
But it's that moment when you
yeah,
realize that you found yourself in a situation where you somehow got yourself out coached. They've got you unprepared for this. I recognize that moment
yeah.
completely, and that's not indicative of ENTJ or ENTP or anything. It's indicative of anybody in a debate round probably knows that feeling. That sometimes when they've got out strategized or out coached,
Right.
and it sucks
Yeah,
ass.
yeah, definitely. I mean, if we had, and I mean, it would have been easy for me to blame my coach there, but I mean, because the fact is, if I was one of those debaters that ran statism K or Foucault critique or Marxism every single round, um, I could always just stand up and argue statism. And but see, my catch-all that I always would fall back on, particularly when I was maybe a junior, and I didn't do as nearly as much research and preparation as I did by the time I was a senior. I would rely heavily on T to get me out of stuff that I otherwise wasn't prepared for. But that case against that team, who was really, 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 really good, um, I couldn't make it stick, and I kind of knew that was going to happen. So
Yeah. So you seem to
definitely
self-identify.
have
You seem to self-identify as a neg debater. Is that
Wait,
true?
say that again.
So you sort of self-identify as your native debate land is neg.
Me? No. No,
No.
no, no, no,
Would you say
no.
your native debate land is AF?
Yeah, my favorite speech was the 1AR, hands down. I love the 1AR. Yeah, I definitely like being an activator more than neg. Although I mean neg too. It's just, I mean, it's actually kind of similar to what I do. I'm a plaintiff's lawyer now, so I represent, like, I've got the burden of proof in all my cases. So definitely, like, I can see some real argumentative advantages to being neg because you don't have to prove things, and you can poke holes and then sort of develop those holes at, then you can try to stick as much through those holes is possible. But no, I think I was more of an activator. Plus, AF's just easier. Although the 2 rounds we dropped in out rounds at the actual NFL tournament were both we lost both rounds. We lost on affirmative, so that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I like that more.
All right. So
Better,
correlation
better
update. Correlation update. AF correlates better with TE. Neg correlates better with TI. So that's
right.
Potentially, if we were looking for, if we're sort of keeping track of consistencies, that would be consistent with ENTJ. I think in general, NTPs prefer neg. I would guess if you were to poll a bunch of NTP debaters, they'd all say neg.
Yeah, maybe. Although I guess like with on the neg, like you can definitely. I mean, and what the reason for that is just from one of the videos of yours that I watched that I've watched it recently, but it was a couple years ago that you posted. It was the T's like having the same case, the whole resolution. So by the time it's March of the resolution, you're like knowing everything that's coming and you're prepared for it. I mean, you can kind of do that on neg if you're running certain types of positions, but
You can,
generally I'm following you.
you can, but I think that the reason why NTPs prefer neg is the reason I always prefer neg is they have to give me shit. They have to give me ammunition before I even have to get off the floor.
Right.
And
Yeah, I can totally see that.
so it's like I like the fact that I neg is better and able to use their words against them.
That's true. That's definitely true.
Okay, so do you feel as though you have trouble experiencing contentment, satisfaction, or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I would. I like not. I mean, to some extent, I would say yeah.
What would it look like if you were in a fully contented state right now? Like, let's say we weren't talking, but you were doing something or whatever, and it was fully contenting to you. What would that look like? That scene.
Okay. One way for me to be fully content is to be on vacation on a beach, reading a book, sipping a drink. That's content a lot of the time. If I'm with my wife and we're on the beach and I'm reading and I'm drinking some kind of drink and just chilling, I can just shred through novels and just I'm feeling good.
Okay, so is the feeling of contentment stem from the fact that all the things that are going on around you are pleasing to you, or does it stem from the fact that you're free from your responsibilities, or that does it stem from the fact that you're able to do exactly what your whim indicates rather than being controlled in some fashion, or something else?
Okay, so I'd explain it as, first of all, the overall situation is pleasant. I mean, obviously, like for example, if you're on a beach in Miami or whatever, it's beautiful, sun, warm, in a pleasing environment. Got a book, got a drink, got my wife there, and it's just good. But also the thing about it that I think is really what makes the difference between that and a typical situation where I feel like I should be feeling really content, but I might not 100% be feeling that way, would be that there's an absence of like external stress coming at me. For example, like let's say I settle a case for a ton of money right now. It's going to be, if it's really sort of a landmark type of thing for me, then I will feel very content for a while. But if it's sort of like a, oh, good, good job type deal, it might be just a couple of minutes before I start like realizing all the other shit that I got to do. So to stay content for like a prolonged period of time requires me to kind of to be able to mentally turn off that thing that's just telling me, oh, well, you got to do this, 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 and this, and this.
Okay. Um, so I have two questions. I'm trying to decide which course to go. I'm going to go to the fishing course here. I want to describe to you what makes me feel content and my relationship between the activity and the contentment. And then I want you to compare and contrast your own relationship with your activity against mine. Okay?
Okay.
So for fishing, the reason why fishing makes me feel unusually content is because it fills this need I have to be productive all the time. Normally, if I'm just sitting around watching TV or consuming something or whatever, I feel like I need to be doing something productive. But when I'm fishing, and possibly it's because of the ongoing putting bait onto hooks and the little things you have to do with your hands continually, and the reeling in and the casting out, possibly because it's full of those little things to do, I feel like content in the sense that I don't feel a need to be more productive, and I don't feel a need to. I feel like I don't know. I just feel content like that. So, do you relate to that or not,
Okay,
or something else?
so this is what makes me think of. I really like hiking, and what I like about hiking would be that you can, you're doing your hike, you're going up the mountain, however long, it's going to be 10 hours in a day or something. And I like that I can just kind of space out. And I like that my mind can kind of go wherever it wants. Um, as far as like the minutia of the fishing, I mean, I like fishing, but I don't necessarily feel like that's a great illustration of what would make me be completely content, if that makes sense.
Okay, so is your how does your restlessness, if you experience it, link to issues of productivity? Is that a matter of concern to you?
Whoa. Okay. All right. Restlessness linked to productivity. So if I don't do productive things, do I get restless?
That's probably a better way to ask the question.
Most of the time. If I've knocked myself out, I give myself permission to switch off, watch Netflix, listen to music, do whatever. But if I like, long gone are the days when I could, to use Australian slang, like chuck a sickie and like call in sick and just goof off. I would literally feel horrendous doing that now. Um, I do need to do stuff, and this is sort of a weird observation. Is recently I've been, I usually work like 60, 70 hours a week. I work a lot. If I'm in trial, I work a ton, and I'm like, God damn it, I want to get to the point where I don't need to work this hard, and I've got more people that I can delegate stuff to. But then at other times, I think, well, shit, if I'm not exerting this much, like, how do I sort of justify my existence, if you will? So I would say I definitely do relate to needing to be productive. And if I'm giving myself like permission to not be doing something, it's probably because I've been real productive for a while. You know what I mean? Your audio is you're
My,
muted.
my bad. How's your SI? Do you skip meals? Do you forget to eat? Do you let yourself get too thirsty?
That's a good question, isn't it? So do I forget to eat? I do skip meals. For me to skip a meal by accident is pretty rare. Like for me to be so busy during a day that like, oh yeah, it doesn't at least occur to me that I need to eat something. That would be pretty unusual. Maybe that happens like once a month or something. I will deliberately not eat breakfast a decent amount, but that's more just like a intermittent fasting thing, not like a forgetfulness thing.
Yeah, I just don't get hungry in the morning. I don't know.
Really?
I don't get hungry until around 11 a.m. and then I have lunch.
At some point between when I wake up and around 1 o'clock, I'm going to get hungry. But I don't usually get so hungry I need to eat like 2 meals in the morning. Or like eating it like breakfast at 9 and eating lunch at noon is too much for me.
Do you sometimes have disagreements with your wife?
My wife, no, not really. I mean, like sometimes, yes, literally yes, but not very often.
So, if can you think of a specific instance where you disagreed about something specific, like she bought a shirt that you thought was a waste of money and you wanted to return it? This is a random example, but something like that. Can you give me some sort of concrete, specific? Is it easy for you to draw that up in your head?
You mean you want me to give you an example of where I argued with my wife at some point about something?
No, I want to know, when I ask you to give me an example, is it easy for you to pull examples up in your head? If you don't actually want to share an example because it's private or something, that's fine.
No. I mean more like an example of what? I'm sorry, I'm a little unclear.
Well, let me give you an example of what kind of example I want. Okay.
Sorry about that. So,
an answer would be something like, yeah, I have disagreements with my wife sometimes. For example, earlier, I indicated to Kimberly that I was getting more texts on my phone, and she said, we have a limited amount of text data. And I thought that was a unnecessarily negative response, and so we argued a little bit about that or something. That would be an example, a concrete example.
Yeah, I would almost never argue a little bit with my wife. The very, 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 very few times that we've ever had an argument would be about something pretty memorable. Like, I remember when we first started dating, maybe like, say we've been married for almost 4 years. So like in 2013, when we were in our first kind of year of going out, I wanted her to move in and she didn't want to move in if we weren't like engaged or married. So we had a fight about that. But in terms of like day to day, like minor stuff, like not really.
Okay, well, can you think of an example of one time when you and she were going to go to either a restaurant or a movie and you disagreed, like you wanted different things?
I don't think that's ever happened. Okay, I mean maybe like she's pretty agreeable. I mean,
okay, but
I'm not trolling you, I swear to God.
I mean, surely, can you think of a single example of anything where I could say, what fruit do you like best? Where you would say oranges and she would say apples.
An example of yeah, I like fruit juice and she does not like fruit juice.
Okay, but can you think of an example of you guys where you learned that?
Say what? No.
Okay, you're almost not 142% sure you're an ENTJ.
Am I?
You are 100%. I can tell you right now. But
really?
The thing that you're not able to do right there, right, this little exchange right here, that's called SI polar.
Mm-hmm.
You literally can't think of actual examples from your own life of shit. It's crazy how.
Well, I came up with one example. I mean, I came up with the example of some big thing. I mean,
that wasn't even an example, because you weren't saying an example of that would have been. Okay, it was like, I don't know, it must have been fall because it was pretty cold, and my wife had come into the house, and I remember she was carrying groceries, and then I said, please move in with me. And then she said, damn it, what's your Cam? Damn it, Cam, I'm not moving in until you engage me, or whatever. Okay, that
Oh, I
would
know what
be,
you're talking about.
that's an actual example.
Yeah, that would be hard for me to do.
Right. And this is one of the beautiful things about SI Polar. It makes typing ENTJs very easy. Because there are only two types who can't do that at all. You and
Really?
ENFJs. You and
So, in other
ENFJs.
words, like a specific example is something that I can't come up with. Like I can't come up with like some concrete example, but then like I can come up with some kind of example. But what you're saying is like the specifics of what happened.
Correct. And if you think about it just
Okay.
as a critique of discourse, the way discourse
Mhm.
goes for SI, people with SI on the front of the stack, is the way I do discourse. So I'll say, people with SI use discourse like this. For example, whenever Kimberly tells a story, she'll say, well, let me think of an actual example. Like, Kimberly would said in a conversation with my, I'm having trouble thinking of an actual example right now of that specific thing. But normally people with SI will go like, yeah, I think Kimberly's somebody who enjoys dancing. For example, last Tuesday we went to the bar together, and after she had a couple of margaritas, Tom asked her to dance, and so she got up and danced. And they're referring to their own memory of the actual event and what happened and stuff, right?
Right.
That's experiential knowing. The alternative to experiential knowing is removing yourself from the equation. Look, I want to know this from an objective perspective. I don't want to be influenced by my own experience at all and knowing. I want to
Mhm.
know because about using my intuition. I know
Yeah.
that Steve's uncomfortable right now. Not because I've ever met Steve before, not because I know how Steve acts, but because I recognize that body language. It's universal. He's uncomfortable right now.
Sure.
That's the kind of knowing that you use on everything. It's your tool function. So you go through life using universal knowing on everything that you need to metabolize data wise.
Hmm.
And with a dominant frame of seeing everything in the world through the frame of how can I make this incoming data a problem for me to solve, and then your tool
Hmm.
function conjoins with that to say I will solve it by knowing the single best, the distillation from a universalist perspective. Yep.
All right. So I want you to tell me if you think something, what function this is. Okay. I came up with this example, and I want to try to see what you think the function is. Okay. So, all right. So listen to these. I've got four different statements here. The first one is guy walks into grocery store, guy pulls out gun, guy shoots clerk, guy walks out of store. All right. So that would be what, like some sort of first degree murder, right? All right. Second scenario is guy walks into store, clerk pulls out gun, guy pulls out gun, guy shoots clerk, guy walks out. That would now be what, like arguable self defense, maybe. All right. So guy walks in a store, guy walks in a store, clerk pulls out gun, guy pulls out gun, clerk fires bullet but misses, guy shoots clerk, guy leaves store. That's sort of like established self-defense. Whereas guy walks in a store, guy says give me the fucking money in the register, clerk pulls out gun, guy pulls out gun, clerk fires and misses, guy shoots clerk, guy leaves store. It would be like felony murder, right? So one thing, and then if we pour 100 different details into each one of those different things, like for example, in the third example, if the guy shoots the Cheetos versus the Doritos or whatever with the stray bullet, that's not going to make any difference. A lot of, what the guy's wearing probably doesn't make any difference, although maybe in the scenario two, if he's wearing gold chains and dreadlocks, maybe that changes your impression of it, or at least it could. But what I'm saying is noticing and if we just assume that we import like hundreds of facts that into each one of those examples, those little like those are the key facts. Those are the facts that if we change those, it would change the whole meaning of the thing.
All right.
What are we doing here?
All right. So what you're doing there is you're saying, this is how we get rid of SI. This is how we get rid of it, because nobody needs any of that stuff. Okay, that stuff just interferes with the universalist aspects of things.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
okay,
much.
look, these are the only elements that matter in determining which exact crime this is going to be, or if it's a crime at all, you know? And,
Exactly.
So...
the thing that if we change that thing, it's a different thing.
Right. So, being able to easily see and parse the world out into elements that are particularist and therefore can be excluded from forums in which particularist things are appropriately excluded, such as court. Okay.
Sure. Or just that it doesn't make a difference. Like, it doesn't make a difference if he hits the Doritos or not.
Right. So it's correct and appropriate that particularist elements like that should be excluded in legal proceedings. And to the extent that they're included, they should be included only in the punishment phase as mitigators, you know, that sort of thing. Okay?
Or, yeah, but I mean, yeah, in addition to that, not to interrupt what you're saying, but that sometimes what you'll see in like forensic stuff, like, you know, I don't do criminal, but I feel like that's a really clear-cut example of what I'm talking about. Sometimes they'll be like, well, do you remember if it was the Doritos or if it was the Cheetos that got hit? Well, you can't remember that. Well, I mean, it's somehow some people undermining the integrity of the.
They're trying to impugn the witness. They're trying.
Yeah, exactly. People will impeach over stupid shit.
But the thing is, that's why, you know, it's like so much of how court proceedings end up depends on the individuals who end up on the stand. And really, for most matters of legal consideration, there shouldn't be so much weight placed upon testimony, because people talking, it's like, you know, okay, so what happened in my situation with do you know about how the cop hit me with the butt of a gun? Did
you?
Yeah.
No, I don't know that.
Just a quick. I'll give you a quick rundown of it so I can get back to where we were going with this. But
right.
Kim and I had dinner. Then there was a police helicopter circling around. We're like, well, let's go see what's going on down there. We drove down there. There was a bunch of cops around this like homeless guy with a stick, and we milled around for a while. I was filming and shit, and eventually they shot him with like rubber bullets and then started tasing the shit out of him, right? So I'm sitting there filming the whole thing. After they've been tasing him for a while, I'm like, stop tasing him. Nobody was saying anything until I said it, and then some other people started saying, you know. But a cop ran up to me and jabbed me in the ribs with the butt of his gun, you know, and said, get out of here. And so I was incensed by this, obviously, and I said, you know, you assaulted me. What the hell? And I made a big fuss about it, because my point was this. My goal was to get qualified immunity quashed, in this case, to set precedent on that, because it was a clear-cut, established constitutional right that the Supreme Court had established as protected that he was violating. He has no possible way to successfully apply a qualified immunity defense here. So I wanted to set precedent that this particular sort of offense eliminated qualified immunity. You know what I'm saying? So
wow, dude.
But instead, I took $5,000. But because I, you know, it's like I needed the $5,000 right then. I was just like, fuck it, and I didn't actually suffer.
If they didn't break your rib or anything, that's probably a smart move.
If they didn't what?
If you didn't break a rib or anything, it's probably a smart move, right?
I mean, I don't think it wasn't a smart move financially, but because the thing is, the reason why it played out the way it did has everything to do with the words I said. Oh, my bad. Can you hear me now? No, let me refresh.
Again.
Are we back?
There you are.
Okay.
Yep, you're back.
But the thing is, the reason that it played out the way it did at all was because I immediately started saying all the right words. So it's like I put the video up. I made videos in which all the right words are, yes, I was, all true, right? Yes, I was mad. Yes, I was shouting at the cops. And yes, he did run up and assault me. And No, I don't think I should have been allowed to get closer. No, I didn't want to interfere. And if he had asked me to step back, I would have stepped back. And in fact, he could have yelled at me to step back. I don't care. He could have said, "Get the fuck back." I would have been happy to step back because that's reasonable. And coming up and jabbing me with the butt of his gun is not.
No.
And so, because the way I made a fuss, that's how it played out that way. It should be linked more to the facts. But that's just not how shit plays out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, those cases are pretty rough, man.
What do you
Constitutional right? Yeah, the 1983 cases, like, if I guess it's Section 1983 of some U.S. code.
Yeah.
The constitutional rights, like basically, police officers, other peace officers are going to be immune under almost any kind of state law, but you can sue them under federal law for a constitutional rights violation and recover damages. But those cases are all in federal court, and they're pretty tough to prove.
But here's the thing. I knew all the federal case law. I knew all the case law, and I knew exactly what the one teeny little window was that they said, yes, you can actually get rid of the qualified immunity. And this hit it exactly on the fucking spot.
So are you regretting settling that case, or are you not regretting it?
Well, not only
because you know what it would have taken for you to change like the jurisprudence of 1983 law would have taken you about 10 years, by the way.
Okay, well, first of all, I wouldn't have been changing it. I would have just been providing the single first concrete example that would have actually set precedent on what they actually say in all their decisions.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have been changing case law at all. I wouldn't have been making new arguments. I would have been making the arguments they've made in denying previous claims.
Okay.
So they would have been fucked. But the point is, no, I'm not sad I took the money because it was like the slabs delivered it. At that moment, I really needed $5,000. It's like things were tight around here, and we were scrapping, and I really needed it. And then I walked into that meeting, and I went in there with my same thing I've been telling them the whole time. Now listen, what I want is this city attorney. I will not sue you guys for anything. I won't sue you for any money at all. And I want the city attorney though to help me sue the cop for $1,000. But if you, but look,
you didn't have a lawyer, right?
No, just me.
Yeah, of course, right?
Yeah.
No, if that happens again, I might know some guys in LA that are that stuff.
Oh, I have to say, I hope it does happen again, but I hope it happens the same way where I get totally unhurt. My point was the reason this fits exactly in this little window is there was no civil rights violation except for the speech violation. In other words,
and hitting you.
But my point was, I'm not considering that an assault intended to hurt me, but an assault intended to silence me.
I mean, it's both, but yeah.
But the key for the constitutional law distinction, though, the key element is the cop has to willfully be violating my civil right. And so it put him in a position where he had to say, no, I wasn't trying to silence you. I was trying to hurt you.
Yeah, it's a better example of that than of brutality, certainly, given some of the other examples of brutality that are out there.
Well, but the point is, my goal was to affect a specific element of case law. It wasn't anything else. So, but
it would make various law reviews and so forth. But no, that's interesting.
But yeah, the city attorney didn't go along. See, I actually expected the city attorney to jump at this. I would think cities would want to minimize their liability. And this would set a rule that minimizes their liability across the board.
You outthought everybody by about. You were way outthinking your audience there.
I told him that on his answering machine. The city attorney kept ducking my call. I explained all the fucking cases and implications of this on his answering machine. I didn't get contacted back until I threatened to go to the budget meeting and tell them they were wasting their money on this fucking city attorney. Then they called me back.
Okay, that's pretty funny, actually.
Anyhow, I don't mean to be. This is your time, so
no, it's hilarious.
Let me help me know what I can do to make you feel as though the time is well spent and you're getting information you want to get out of it.
Well, I feel like we should shit on Dave's superpowers a little bit. What do you think?
What did he type you as?
ENFP.
He typed you as an ENFP?
Yeah.
I mean,
should I get the garbage can?
It's pretty amazing.
It's shocking, dude. It's like How can this guy be known as a typology expert if he typed you as an ENFP? Who in their right mind would think you're an
I don't know,
ENFP?
man. So, but hold on. You gotta get the self tribe coin. Okay, you've got to understand that this is somebody that's asking himself and not other people first. Okay, I mean,
Okay, well, listen, you be Dave, and I'll be you, and then you tell me
okay,
afterwards if this is how the actual conversation works. I bet it went very much like this. So,
go ahead.
okay, you say, so I'm asking myself, not the tribe. Um, well, I don't even know. Actually, did it go like that? Did the conversation go like
No,
that?
no. Okay, so let me tell you what I did when I talked to him. I was like, first of all, um, what makes you think that? Because they have that whole, I don't know how much of their videos you've watched, but like they have that observer versus decider thing where if you're an observer, you get triggered by things and life is about things. And if you're a decider, that means like an IP or an EJ, then your life is about people, which would make any TI Dom or any TE Dom a decider. So I'm like, please explain to me how TE and TI is all about people. And he's like, yeah, that's just kind of like what we're seeing because we've observed that pattern a bunch and that's kind of what we're seeing and so forth. um and
You
then
don't see empirics don't give you interpretations.
mm-mm,
We're
no.
seeing these interpretations is not true. We're making these interpretations off of data and claiming that
Yeah, or like we're seeing at scale that people who wear purple socks prefer to go to the gym on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I mean, like, it doesn't make any sense, right? And then the next thing that I said was, why are you saying that, TE is about tribe and TI is about self? Like, where are you getting that? And they just kind of are just, they're just shoehorning those Tony Robbins human needs onto OI, OE, DI, and DE, and just kind of saying, hey, because there's four of each of them, then hey, it must be the same thing.
so.
And there was really no explanation for this.
So when you started watching DSP, presumably initially you thought, okay, well this guy maybe has something. How long did it take you to decide that start getting sort of skeptical about it?
I was skeptical pretty much immediately, but the thing is that I like, for example, I got into any kind of typology with Enneagram when my sister was had a book on Enneagram, probably when I was in high school, and I've been sort of a casual student of the thing for a long time. And here comes this new theory that says that if you put other people's opinions in front of yours, then you're a tribe, and if you put your own opinions in front of other people's, you are self. Therefore, DE, like TE would be like, so basically in order to be a TE, I need to care about what everybody else thinks and not me. And I'm like, well, then if that's true, then by no stretch of the imagination could I be the type that I've thought I was for like 15 years. And
Okay, so
I just kind of, but the thing is about it is like their videos are pretty entertaining. Like, they're pretty well produced, and although a lot of the content is sort of nonsense and there's a lot of off cue laughter and stuff, but like they do work hard to produce the content. I mean, that's pretty clear. So it's entertaining, but you know,
and it gives a really sciencey vibe sometimes that can be really satisfying and convincing that this
oh, you
must
mean when
be.
they talk about how because there's four human needs and four of OE, I, and blah blah blah, but because there's four of them, or the demons. Maybe it's the demons that they're talking about that make them seem so sciencey. I think that's very scientific.
No, I think the sciencey aspect comes from the fact that they're not talking about what they want to be. They're talking about what they see. Empirics.
Right. Well, I mean, if you're a big believer in extracting um, any kind of input from the person, like for example, if we want to just completely remove other, all right, hold on, I lost my train of thought there. If you want to completely remove the person who you're trying to type's input from the process of typing, that's kind of interesting, right? Because it's almost like a way of typing persona, not who you are, like, or not who you see yourself as, but just completely 100% what other people see you as.
Yeah, it's saying if we, well, I mean, it's a very ENTJ approach. It's saying, can we
Is
eliminate?
it? But I don't.
Here's why, though. He wants to eliminate the particularist. So what I'm telling you is, I cannot successfully type you without having a conversation that allows me to be responsive or reactive, like, or adaptive in some sense. So, for example, I have to check your SI. I have to double check your SI. And if I really want to be sure it's SI polar, and the beautiful thing about that SI polar test is it doesn't matter how hard I try to get you to understand what I'm saying and give me what I'm looking for, you just won't do it. And so,
Yeah.
but I need to check that. I
That
can't.
makes a lot more sense to me.
And there's no way I can put that in a written test. I cannot accomplish typing you with a written test that you fill out, because I need to have the capacity to have that particularist experience. In other words, I have to have a individual experience of me pulling that out of you so that I know, okay, that is that. I'm convinced of it now.
Experience.
Whereas what ENTJ is going to want to do is say, well, that makes it less valid because it's not universal then. I can't use it to against anybody. It doesn't validate universally. It doesn't falsify.
Right, yeah. I understand, because, like, for example, on forums, like topology forums, there's always some shitstorm of, like, what type is this person, and nobody can agree on it. So it's almost like they're trying to create a system that would allow them to have, like, some absolute sort of...
They want a final authority that they can justify with universal justifications. But the thing is, here's the good news. I actually am the final authority on the matter. Now, it doesn't mean that I can prove that with universal justifications, although I'm getting close. My full case is coming together here as I continue to piece it together, and it starts with understanding, like, what should cognitive functions do or be as a model.
Right.
And the thing is, if we first use language right, when I used to talk about it and I didn't really have it modeled, I referred to it as a taxonomy. And if it is a taxonomy, then there's a fundamentally arbitrary quality to it, because it doesn't, it's like there are lines that suggest group put this in this set or this in that set, but there will always be lots of things that sort of fit in both sets if it's just a taxonomy. So if you want to then think of it as something more and call it a model and think of it as a model and treat it as a model, as someone like DSP does, then you need to understand, okay, well, what comprises the model? What do I need to do to model something? And what that means is I need to reduce it to fields, objects, vectors, functions, things like that.
Right. And what they've done is really reduce it to, like, strictly going off of what's observable and manifest, and not any kind of back and forth between the person. You know what I mean? It's like we're typing strictly. It's almost like a system that has some sort of.
Well, they're trying to make it like IQ. They're trying to make it like an IQ test. So an IQ test is, you can count on that in terms of its correlations to outcomes. So it's like they've done all these tests to say, well, let's measure how people do in terms of their love lives as it correlates to their IQ.
It's like porn and amateur.
Okay.
I don't know what that means. But
all right. That makes totally.
Sorry.
That's okay. So it's like the good thing about an IQ test is because it's a meaningless number. In other words, it's just how you score on this test, right? Then you can actually draw concrete correlations. Because everybody takes the same exact test, and everybody gets a score on the test, it doesn't really matter what is the test is actually testing, as long as you're just looking at the correlations with the score. So the thing is, that's what they want to do with typology. They want to say, it doesn't matter. These names we're using are basically arbitrary. As long as we have a single standardized test, and everybody gets a type on that, then that can be how we define type, is by that test.
Right. Yeah, they want to be able to establish consensus, which is going to require everybody basically using the same model. And if everybody uses the same model, then the consensus is going to exist by virtue of people's buy-in to the model.
But that makes it absolutely relative. It makes it absolute, but absolutely relative. So in other words, everything's relative to the test. Whereas what I'm saying is, no, let's make it both relatively absolute and absolutely empirical to the extent we can, but relatively absolute meaning let's make the whole thing consistent as a model, and we can actually test that by saying if we were to model it precisely enough, then that would provide the mechanics for a computer simulation of agents interacting via cognition in a system.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, there was one thing that you were saying that was really interesting about this when you were, I don't remember if it was a Type Police on Ben Sadek or if it was in a different one, but you were sort of just ripping apart the idea that it didn't matter if what they were saying was true. It's like, no, actually, this is only as useful and as applicable and as valid as it is actually true. I don't remember what exactly you were saying, but it's pretty, maybe I'm having an SI Polar moment, but it was actually pretty fucking smart.
well, I
don't remember
thank
what that
you,
was.
but I think that maybe what you're talking about is something I want to make a video about really soon, which is I talked to Damon Gray. Do you know who Damon Gray is?
Yeah, he's the guy I got confused with C.S. Joseph, even though I guess he's not C.S. Joseph.
No. He's also known as Chad Crandall. He started the MBTV channel before, and it was doing quite well. And then he got disillusioned with MBTI. He's a certified MBTI practitioner, but he got disillusioned with it. And now he's doing some other things. But anyway,
he's an ENTJ, right?
He's an ENTJ, but I believe I haven't formally typed him yet. I'm pretty sure he's an ENTJ though.
Well, I think obviously, like what I'm trying to say is he self-types as that.
No, he self-types as an ESTP now. And this is the meat of what I'm getting at, is that he told me, well, I'm sure I'm an ENTJ in your system, Eric, and I'm an ESTP in socionics. Now, there's a huge, massive fucking problem with that.
Yeah.
And I
hold on, let's do this. Let's talk about this for a little bit.
It's hard to explicate it all. I'm still working it all out, which is why I haven't made the video yet. But the problem is,
how could you really though mistype an ESTP as an ENTJ or vice versa?
Well, because he's saying, look, socionics talks about SE as being a forceful thing, a commanding thing.
Mm-hmm. And I would say in any, well, really, I think there's like two types of SE. There's like exertionary or exertive or SE, and then there's like indulgent SE. Like there's SE that's just like, I just want to indulge in things and just have as much fun as I can and indulge as much pleasure as I can. And there's SE, like what you would see in more in like athletes where they're just trying to strive for something.
Okay, so I would argue that any of those kind of understandings of SE are always not talking about SE at all, because SE is doing the thing that you've already planned to do. That's most of all what it is. Doing the thing you've already planned to do. And the other thing that most of all it is jumping at an opportunity that presents itself in conjunction with NI telling you now. So it's like SE is thought of as lots of things that aren't functions, that aren't processes. The actual process is following through on the thing you've already decided to do. Instead of ideating more ideas you could do, it's just doing the thing, digging the hole. That's SE.
Yeah, I mean, okay, let me try again. SE is taking in everything that's happening in the present through your five senses. And so, okay, hold on. Here's something that I wanted to bring up. I'm glad that you've somehow jogged my memory on this. I see the distinction between SE and SI is kind of like hard space versus soft space. Have you heard of that distinction? Would be like soft space would be if you didn't focus on anything and you just like looked ahead of you, sort of a blank stare. You're kind of getting in everything that's in your field of vision. Whereas like if you held your hand out and still didn't focus on it, you would have still soft space. But if you just focus on, like I'm focusing on my hand right now, that's hard space, where it's like I'm literally just focused on the exact details of this and everything else is kind of not visible. For example, like French Impressionism would be SE, whereas a Dutch master still life would be SI. It's like literally focusing on.
Okay, but see, this is the thing. Neither of those things are either of those things. It's like
okay.
The problem. Let's think of it in terms of we have to operationalize our understandings of the functions. That's to say, it only makes sense to understand a function in ways that we can fit into a simulation. So SE then is the manner of attention that causes an agent, or that the function executed that results in the agent following through and doing a thing. Now, that's something that actually is a function, right? Whereas those other things you're talking about aren't functions. In math, plus makes
some kind of analogy, yeah.
Yeah, plus makes things do like 4 plus 2 equals 6. You could say, that there. Now look, plus is the one that usually ends up with positive numbers, with some exceptions, and that usually ends up with round numbers with some exceptions. But you're missing the point. That's not what addition is at all. Those things are just descriptions of equations that have addition in them. So the same thing is true with functions. If we think that every function has to do something in the simulation specific, and the kinds of things that can be done are putting information, getting information, receiving information, and interfacing with the ecosystem, then all functions have to link back to that in some way.
Okay, gotcha. So you're saying SE is following through on something that you've already decided to do?
Putting information in the physical world, or putting information in a physical ecosystem. So in other words, I plan to finish digging this hole outside where I'm digging a hole for putting a second pond in. And I will go out there and dig later, And when I do, that's SE. My SI is keeping track of the fact that I want to do that still. I'm going to do that. It remembers that I've decided to do that. Now, I'm not ideating at all. My NE is shut off in this equation. I'm not saying, but you know what? Maybe I want to dig a hole over there instead. I've already started the hole. It's going there. Okay?
Right.
So that's where SE and NE, that's why they're 1-8 for me. But, I mean, that's why you never get them on the same side of the stack, right? Because I'm either ideating new places where I might dig a hole, or I'm actually following through on one of the ideas. And they're exclusive of each other. And so those kind of relationships.
SI, how would you describe SI then? I mean, in terms of like my analogy for SI is literally like the bar stool game where you're trying to look at two almost identical photographs and pick out like the small.
It's nice. Okay, no.
Okay, I mean that's what I'm asking.
Because SE, look, okay. SI, remember, is a knowing function, but most specifically, it's a kind of knowing that you probably would go like, why would you ever want to know like that? Like, let's say you were considering an investment in something, and you were considering investing in a particular CD, okay, that somebody recommended to you, and so you thought, okay, well, I want to know if I should invest in this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remember back. Let's see. Okay, yes, I remember I had a friend who invested in a CD before, and she was happy with it. And I remember, oh yeah, my dad recommended CDs to me back in the day. And I remember I invested in something like a CD before, and it was successful. Okay, I am going to invest in this CD. That's SI way of knowing. Okay, now you wouldn't do that. You'd research it in some way. You learn about the CD itself, this specific CD. You wouldn't say, I can look to the past for related past things for guidance here. You'd conclude, those things aren't relevant. I'm going to just look at the relevant details and conclude specific things about this specific CD based on universal truths about monetary stuff. Okay?
Right.
So,
I agree with that.
And the reason why you have so much trouble understanding SI is because it seems so utterly foreign to you that somebody would naturally or willfully or ever choose to do that thing I described that you don't do.
Yeah. So using past events and recollection of past events that are somehow connected to, or just whatever I happen to know from the past is going to be relevant there.
Right. And that, like, if you're an SI Dom like Kimberly, when she could come up to a brand new situation, like some incredibly crazy, strange alien creature pops in front of her, and her first thought will be like, this reminds me of the time when I went to the zoo and saw that jellyfish in the aquarium exhibit, and it had a vague resemblance to this thing. And that reminds me of the time that I had
Even though it
jellyfish.
has no similarity, huh?
But an SI DOM, that's their initial gut interface with everything in the world, is to link it back to something from before. And the reason for this is, if you think about the model again, the simulation, the entities in the simulation need to retain objects within them of various things, like the fact that I plan to continue digging the hole. Sure, that's obviously useful information to retain. The fact that I saw a jellyfish at the zoo when I was 7 years old is not useful information to retain. Lots of people retain a lot of that information anyway, because they're SI users. I have a mind full of memories of childhood and stuff, and I'm fourth slot SI. And I link back to those all the time. And the reason is because any and SI need each other. Any can build off shit that's in the present. Like I could say, let me tell you a story about a Sprouts jacket that had 2 strings on it, and one of the strings was named Steve. I could just use SE to build any off of, right? But the thing that makes any weird or different or disparate is the associative link. So what I do is, if I'm telling a story about a gopher named Bob, then I might remember that I had a friend once named Bob who owned a bar. So I'll say, and this gopher named Bob owned a bar. And I might remember this one time I went to this other bar where I saw this lady writing with a big crayon. And so I'll include that in the story. So anyway, Bob.
That sounds more like NE to me, but just
no. But what I'm saying is how NE and SI need each other, right? I have to have those associative links to random memories to incorporate them as new elements in disparate things, and that's where weirdness comes from.
Right. Yeah, that thought laddering is something that I kind of identify with as like NE usually. Like, you know what I mean? Where it's like, this makes you think of this, which makes you think of this, which makes you think of this, which makes you think of this, and then all of a sudden you end up like completely far away from where you started.
It is true, but you're missing the key component of it. What it makes you think
of the past experience.
The past experience. Yeah, that's the thing that makes you think of. If you're an NI user, it makes you link to NI things. So if I say, I need you to understand that no matter what you call it, it's still the same thing. You're gonna think to yourself, maybe like, a rose by any other name is still a rose.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's the universalist link. Whereas, like Kimberly would think of this time when I said something similar to her in the past, or think of some other kind of link like that. So it's always going to be hard for you to understand SI because it's your polar. It's just as hard for me to understand FI, my own feelings.
So polar would be like the POLR, polar, right? That's the worst. Like that's the weakest of them all, correct?
But I mean, I don't like the words weak and strong. But I don't like the words weak and strong, and there's a reason for this. If you think about my FI polar, my feelings can be very strong. They're very strong, but I don't attend to them very often, and they're not very sticky. And to the extent that is it a strong or weak function? Well, unlike some other functions, it doesn't get me in trouble very often. So it kind of saves my ass a lot. It's kind of an exotic function. I'm attracted to it. I find it alluring. FI, but
a better analogy would be right-handed, left-handed.
It's the thing is here's how your polar works. Imagine you are deaf to fire engine sirens, and only fire engine sirens. Okay. Now you're never going to realize you're deaf to this, probably, because what's going to happen is early in childhood, when fire engines come by, everybody goes like, ah. So you start thinking this is a social display thing that everybody needs to do when fire engines drive by. And so usually fire engines drive by, the sirens are on, it's loud. You go, ah, like everybody else. You're not actually hearing the siren, you just think that's what one does. Occasionally what will happen is a fire engine will drive by with its lights on, but no siren. And you'll go, ah, and people will go look at you like, what are you doing? And you go, the fire engine siren thing. But you're not actually hearing it. That's your polar.
So you're able to, okay. You can see other people doing it, and you can kind of connect it.
You're always mistaking the symbol for the thing. You're always mistaking the symbol for the thing. And like I'm always being told by people, Eric, that's not FI, that's just more of your FE. But I'm starting to learn when it is FI now. I'm starting to find ways to identify it. But it's taking me till I'm 47 years old, 48 now, and I'm finally being able to like, if you would have asked me a year ago, how do you identify, where do you find in you or identify an emotion? I wouldn't have had any answer for you. But now I do have an answer.
And what's enabled you to be able to do that?
Talking to Becky, my therapist, Becky. Okay. Planet Catch-Up.
Planet Catch-Up.
Yeah. We, Kimberly had gotten a therapist. We were looking into therapy and stuff, but Becky suggested a couple things, and I said, well, can you talk to us about this stuff? And she's been fucking just gift from heaven. She's like an amazing, she's my hero. She's really turned our relationship around. It's difficult.
That's awesome.
It's difficult because, I'm difficult to deal with.
Really?
If you're a therapist, I'm difficult to deal with.
Okay.
In a relationship therapy thing, for sure. Because look,
right.
The problem is, I'm always going to be right, at least technically. So so the therapist has got to explain to me that this is not a circumstance where being right matters at all, and it's got to continually resell me on this notion. Because
or at least you'll be able to come up with more and more like reasons and rationalizations. You'll be able to spin out arguments for what you're, whatever your baseline is, you're going to be able to justify it with something.
Well, right? Yeah, and it's not just that. I actually am right, like in the sense that, But the point is that's still the wrong approach to take. If I want solvency of problems, then I need to stop worrying about who's correct.
Yeah, and that's actually weird because sometimes I have to just deliberately squash my own desire to argue with other people and just say, hey, look, arguing is not going to do anything. Why don't I just admit that it was my fault even if it absolutely wasn't, or admit that I'm wrong even when I'm absolutely not wrong, just because I can tell what's going to happen if I do that, and that's going to be beneficial to me. I feel like that would be hard for some people to do. For sure.
Okay. That's not even. I'm not even talking about that, but that's a very funny 8-slot FE version of what I'm talking about. Your 8-slot FE, it cares about other people's perceptions only as it's instrumental to your TE. In other words, only insofar as it's useful in one of your general solvency frames.
Yes, it can be very useful.
Then you care about it, and when it's not useful, you don't care about it.
All right.
I think what I'm talking about is probably a little bit different than that. It's like, it's more like, I'm convinced that the solution is always to be found in the truth and the facts. But that's not the case necessarily. Sometimes putting more truth and facts in front of us so that we can all understand this better does not help, actually. That what we need to do is focus on the things that we know despite facts and evidence sometimes. Like, if I just listen to what Kimberly says, because she's sort of emotionally influenced in her language choice, I might take to heart things she definitely doesn't mean. And if I want to be a loving partner that prioritizes the well-being of her, me, and the relationship, I ought to choose not to hold her to the fire, even if I'm perfectly capable of doing so, and empowered to do so, and justified in doing so because of the language. Instead, I ought to work to get us to both the same spot where we go, that was not representative of what we actually feel or what we actually mean. In other words, being less attached to the words.
And this is FI in a way to you, like you're getting there with FI. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, it's a challenging gig for me because it does require me to incorporate some FI, I guess, calculation. Is that what it is? I guess.
Yeah, because FI gives you the ability. I think FI kind of gives you the ability to identify, like, you can put yourself in other people's shoes pretty easily and tell what you would be experiencing in that situation. So you kind of almost just switcheroo a bunch with FI.
Yeah,
if you disagree.
that's a good point. You need a cigarette?
Me?
Did you say you need a cigarette?
No, I said you could switcheroo with people.
Oh, and then I thought you said I need a cigarette. I don't know why you said that. I think maybe because I need a cigarette.
Probably.
I must have just heard
I feel like you had one someplace.
I know I know I did have them. I have lost them.
But I could definitely switcheroo and see that you do need a cigarette.
That's good FI.
You've been going for a while here.
You know, that's true actually, and that's very informative. That informs my thinking dramatically that's what's going on there. If I choose to put myself in her emotional situation, then I'm no longer extracting interested equation from the issue, and I'm allowing
That's true.
interest to come back into the equation.
Well, I mean, you can see the interest there, right? Like, it's not really that hard to do. I mean, it's if you do it enough, it's not that hard to just kind of tell, hey, this is what I would be doing in that situation. Because if you have a disinterested analysis, you should be able to tell like what are the objective factors that are influencing what that person is looking at, and therefore just kind of see where you would be at from their perspective.
Yeah, but see, that's the tricky thing. I can't see where I would be from their perspective if the data were the same as it is. I have to say, what is she probably feeling knowing what I know about her past experience and how it influences our current interactions? Because there's a lot of SI between us. I'm an SI seeker and she's an SI dom.
Mm-hmm.
That makes things a lot more complicated.
So, yeah, like when I'm trying to get somebody, like, for example, like when I'm trying to get somebody to use sort of an empathic thing, for example, in like a lawsuit or whatever, like somebody, like one of the attorneys, like a baby lawyer or whatever, that I'm trying to teach how to do stuff, I will just say, imagine if you were in the other party's shoes and you sincerely believed that this was not your fault. What are the things that you would say to yourself to justify that to yourself? So it's just kind of, it's like, not just change the shoes, like, switcheroo yourself to that other person, but sort of like assume that they're going to feel this particular way about it. What are you going to be telling yourself to support that perspective? Because
that's demonstrative NE, which I haven't really seen a lot heretofore because you're not at work. But when you start talking, this is what I do at work. Well, what do you do at work? Demonstrative NE, and that's perfect example of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've recently started falling in love with like voice memos and stuff like that, where I'm like, I used to get criticized a lot for just staying in my own office and working on my own cases and ignoring like the 20 other lawyers at the law firm and never helping anybody. People would kind of come to me if they had questions, and I'd kind of kick their ass a little bit if they were bothering me. But
lately,
my solution, huh?
Do people find you intimidating?
I mean, people have said that.
That's what that's how every intimidating person answers the question.
I mean,
people tell me that. I don't know what they're thinking.
It's really just that, when I'm busy as shit, I don't really want to talk to people because I'm just trying to clear stuff out. But what I've started to do is have like weekly meetings for the, younger attorneys at the office, and sort of really like make a affirmative effort to try to get myself, like to make myself more available and, do more teaching and stuff inside the office, because I just feel like people are happier and they bother me less, and people are definitely like, I'm noticing some good results from that.
I've got an FE suggestion for you. When you're interacting with those younger lawyers, refer to them as champ, chief, tiger, or sport. People love that.
It. So yeah, one lawyer, probably the most senior lawyer in office used to just always call everybody chief.
Oh, God.
Chief, champ, tiger, and sport.
Yeah,
tiger and sport. Chief and champ, I think, are the better of the four.
Whenever people,
what about boss?
That's one too. No, but that's one too. And somebody at fucking Taco Bell did that to me today. They called me boss as I'm talking to them on the fucking thing.
And you loved it.
No, I hate that shit. Anytime anybody does it to me in a live stream, if they say like, "What up? How's it going, chief? How's it going, champ?" or something like that, I always go, Not bad. How's it going with you, Tiger?
Is it, so you see it for the tactic that it is?
Yeah, it's just an FE tactic. It's an FE domination tactic.
That's funny.
And I just turn it right back
I'll
on
start
them.
using that more often.
Yeah, I just go one harder. Oh, you're going to call me Chief, I'll call you Tiger.
Yeah. That's funny.
So,
Tiger.
So okay, talk to. Let's get back to the basic topic here, which is you've probably felt pretty solid about your type coming in, huh?
I felt solid about being an ET that's not ESTP. I felt solid about ENTJ, but if you said ENTP, I would, and you could come up with some kind of reason, I wouldn't be completely unwilling to listen to you. Certainly, I was not really that willing to listen to ENFP, but I think that's just bullshit. And
okay, well, let me tell you why.
Yeah, ESTJ, I was considering that.
Here's the thing. When I interacted with you prior to talking to you, my thought coming in is you're probably an ENTP.
Really?
But that just shows you how you cannot rely on those indicators. Because just because you have a very ENTP-ish pattern in some ways, but that stems from being a lawyer and being in debate and shit.
That's true. So what would be the things that you would say that, like, I think this guy's an ENTJ rather than an ENTP because of these reasons? What would be, other than the SI polar, which you've talked about?
Okay, well, first of all, the TE is you do a lot of TI style parsing. And so one would be inclined almost to say, oh, well, look, there's a lot of TI there. However, the reason why I don't see it as TI and I see it as TE from a discursive standpoint is I don't hear the self-correcting that TI types will periodically interject into their talking. So TI types will periodically say, you know, when I was there was like 3 people there. No, actually, there was 5 people there. Okay, so there's 5. TI people do that sometimes. It's not like a constant thing, but when they do misspeak, they're always checking what they just said to make sure it's consistent. And they'll correct themselves periodically because it's a conscious, willful function for them. You don't need to do that.
Right.
And the reason you don't need to do that is because it's ignoring for you, which means your TE operates on the assumption that you will always be able to count on communicative consistency. Like, that's not something you have to worry about at all. You validate on consistency. You know you validate on consistency, and so you don't have to attend to that very much. As a consequence, it frees you up to validate the action willfully and consciously on effectiveness or efficiency, or what you might best call ordinality. So what TE is really about is interfacing with things that have an ordinal quality to them. If I want to fix a broken sink, there's a certain order I have to go in. Like, I used to teach expository speeches, and there were 2 kinds. You know, how to make an omelet is one kind, and how to be cool is another kind. How to be cool is non-ordinal. It doesn't matter which order you put the steps in. You can say, here's the various things you can do to be cool. It doesn't matter whether you put on sunglasses first or whether you get a cool hat first. Either of those 2 things will help you to be a little more cool, and I can put them in either order in my speech. Whereas, how to make an omelet, if I break the eggs after I flip the omelet, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So the thing is, TE is about those ordinal kind of problems. That's what makes it solvency-based, is it's looking at things that can be addressed with a dynamic interface. A dynamic interface with non-social systems. So what that means is to interface dynamically with a system is to allow it to have its ordinality, to realize that there's an architecture you have to engage with. That I can't just start working on, I'm going to start working on a web page today without thinking at all about the architecture ahead of time, right?
Right.
TE is a frame of attention that says, I'm going to attend to these qualities of ordinality in the systems of the world. Of
Yeah.
I tend to how I need to think about the architecture first, and then implement it in a certain order of operations if I'm going to successfully get from A to Z. This is a complicated problem. I got to get all the way from A to Z. Then I really have to pay attention to the ordinalities. Now, the thing is, there are different kinds of problems in the world. So, if I'm making a stir fry, it's fine for me to be non-ordinal. I can say, I can taste it. Oh, you know what? I can add a little bit of this, add a little bit of that. Oh, this came out good. It's not okay to do that if you're baking a cake. If you're trying to bake a cake like that, I'm just going to put it in for a little longer, a little less time, a little more flour, a little less flour. Your cake's going to come out shitty.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's like the linear sequencing
and what
of things. Like you need to do this before you do this, before you do this, and then yeah.
And what it represents is if the system is dynamic or static. If a system is dynamic, then it requires you to interface with it in some sort of way that doesn't allow you to say, okay, let me pull back, plan forever, and now let me take a long action. That's the kind of type that is deliberating action types. So that's either ENTP, INTP, whatever. I'm action first and then deliberation, INTP, deliberation, then action, but it doesn't matter because it's the same basic principle. It's like I can pull back, deliberate for a while, make a decision, and then go in and implement that full decision. Now that assumes, right, that the system is static. It's not going to change while I'm out there deliberating, and I'll be able to implement my full plan without realities in the moment making that plan moot or irrelevant or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being a TE DOM means you're the other kind of attention that is the interface knowing kind. You want to interface with something responsibly. You're aware of the fact that things may change and you need to adjust sometimes. That I can't follow through on this plan anymore because that thing broke. I need to fix that first. That's an interface knowing approach, and your knowing function, your second function, is universal. So what you're doing is saying, for all the things in the world you're coming across, I'm assuming that the world is full of dynamic system problems, and I will use ordinality to impose my will upon the world and make it conform with my expectations better.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that was sort of like what I was thinking. I mean, there's your irrational versus rational information element in socionics would be that would give the TE a more ordinal quality than, for example, an NE DOM would have.
That's the problem with information elements. That's the problem with information elements. The thing in the world has no quality. The attention that one gives to it defines your relationship with it. And the thing is, let's say there's a problem with a doorknob. That has no information that it's giving to you about what it is or what you do with it. Your attention does. If you're a TE DOM, you see it as a broken doorknob that needs to be fixed. If you're an FE DOM, you see it as a challenging way you're going to have to talk to your husband about something. Okay? If you're a TI DOM, you're going to maybe muse about why doorknobs are made this way and whatever else, and whether it's justified to make it this way because it's easy to break and it seems like a poor design. You're going to sort of critique it ideationally. If you're an NE DOM, you might think, ooh, I could use a broken piece of that doorknob to glue onto my car and make a cool design or something,
So NE crazy.
So to say that there are information elements in the world is to mistake, again, as many people do, the simple fact that all cognitive functions occur within a single individual.
Mm-hmm.
There are no external cognitive functions.
Right. And I mean, obviously your attention is going to be sort of an undifferentiated thing that, only if you're really being very self-aware and reflective, probably after the fact, can you really even see how you're using your attention.
Well, it should also be noted that you have a finite number of hours in any given day to pay attention, so that we can always measure attentional, what people call strength, which is really attentional bandwidth hoggery, right? It's like we can measure it in terms of minutes and hours and days compared to the other ones. So I'll spend almost my entire day including NE somewhere in the mix. But my FE, my active, willful, attentive FE is much less frequently occurs to me, at least in terms of words in my head, right? I can keep track of those things, and I have learned to have trained myself, not intentionally, but over the course of doing all this cognitive function shit for years, that every time something interesting or weird happens, I check my own attentional reality at that moment. What am I doing in my head right now?
Yeah.
So it helps me to come up with examples.
It's not like the most natural thing in the world, is it? But you've been doing it a ton, then yeah.
And
for sure.
And an example of this that you could maybe think help a little bit to clarify SI and NI too, which is I was driving in the car and I was going to go to to pick up this guy downtown, but I was thinking in my car about what else I might do while I was downtown. And while I was thinking about what else I might do while I was downtown, I forgot where I was going, as is typical fashion. Now, I had right in front of me a piece of paper that had the address of where I was going. But instead of looking around me and taking the obvious NI cue as to where I was going, I sat in the car and was like, all right, well, where was I and what was I thinking about when I decided where I was going to go? And I traced my mind back to when I was sitting back here in the garage and, talking to Kimberly. Oh, that's right, I'm going to pick up Ruben. That's what I'm doing. And then I looked and I saw the paper. I was like, oh, that's me being an SI conscious and NI ignoring. The NI truth is right in front of me, but I'm using my experiential knowledge of the thing instead. I'm tracing my steps back, trying to remember.
You're rewinding back to what you were thinking before.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's the sort of instance that prompts me to note what's going on cognitively, and then later I relate the story to you.
Very cool. So, all right, hold on. I got a timeout here. I've got to piss something fierce right now.
Go big. Go. Yeah.
Yeah. But hold on. You've been recording this?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you send it to me? How would you do that?
Yeah, I'm going to upload it to the channel, but I'm going to set it to private. Nobody else will be able to see it except you. I'll push share, I'll put your email address in, and then I'll get an email from you saying, I clicked the link and I still couldn't see it. This happens about half the time because I don't know why YouTube private video share is buggy. And so then I'll email you the link again and it'll work that time. This has happened many times. I don't know why that happens all the time, but it does. So you'll get an email from YouTube saying, you are invited to see this video, but the link in that email very well might not actually work. You might have to have me send you the link again. Okay?
All right, I will tell you. I will look for a link, and if it doesn't work, I will email you and tell you.
All right, cool.
Well, hey, it's been really good to talk to you, man.
It's been really great talking to you too. And I'll say the same thing to everybody. If you have any follow-up questions or anything, email me. I'm happy to answer them.
I will do that. All right, man.
All right,
have a good evening.
Talk to you later. You too.
Later. Bye.
Bye.